The sun was setting over the dense forest, casting long shadows across the ground. The air was filled with the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves. In a small clearing, a little bobcat cub named Kiba was playing near a fallen tree. His soft fur was a mix of brown and white, and his big, curious eyes sparkled with innocence. Kiba was alone, as he often was. His mother had gone hunting, leaving him to explore the world on his own. Kiba was still young, but he was brave and full of energy. He pounced on leaves, chased after butterflies, and even tried to climb trees, though he wasn't very good at it yet. The forest was his playground, and he loved every inch of it. But today, something felt different. The usual sounds of the forest seemed quieter, as if the animals were holding their breath. As Kiba wandered further from the clearing, he noticed a group of crows perched on the branches above him. There were at least a dozen of them, their black feathers glistening in the fading light. They cawed loudly, their sharp eyes fixed on the little cub. Kiba tilted his head, curious. He had seen crows before, but never so many at once. The crows began to hop from branch to branch, following Kiba as he moved. Their cawing grew louder, more intense. Kiba's ears twitched, and a small shiver ran down his spine. He didn't understand why, but he felt uneasy. He quickened his pace, hoping to leave the crows behind, but they continued to follow him, their dark forms looming overhead. Kiba's heart began to race. He was used to being alone, but this felt different. The crows were relentless, their cries echoing through the trees. He tried to run, but his small legs couldn't carry him fast enough. The crows swooped down, surrounding him in a flurry of wings and sharp beaks. Kiba let out a frightened yelp, his tiny body trembling as he tried to fend them off. Just as the crows closed in, a loud growl erupted from the bushes. The crows scattered, their caws turning into panicked squawks as they flew away. Kiba froze, his eyes wide with fear. From the shadows emerged a large, powerful figure. It was a full-grown bobcat, her golden eyes glowing with intensity. She moved with grace and strength, her muscles rippling beneath her fur. Kiba's fear melted away as he recognized a familiar scent. It was his mother, Nara. She had returned just in time. Nara stepped forward, her gaze softening as she looked at her cub. She nuzzled him gently, her warm breath comforting him. Kiba pressed himself against her, feeling safe once more. Nara's eyes narrowed as she scanned the trees, her ears twitching. She could sense that something was wrong. The crows had never been so aggressive before. She knew the forest was changing, and not for the better. She had heard rumors from other animals about strange happenings, missing creatures, unusual behavior, and an eerie silence that sometimes fell over the woods. Nara decided it was time to move. She couldn't risk staying in this part of the forest any longer. She nudged Kiba, urging him to follow her. The little cub obeyed, staying close to his mother as they made their way through the trees. The sun had almost set, and the forest was growing darker by the minute. As they walked, Kiba couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting the crows to return. But the forest was quiet now. Too quiet. Even the usual nighttime sounds were absent. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Nara led Kiba to a hidden den, a safe place she had prepared for them. It was well hidden, surrounded by thick bushes and tall trees. She ushered Kiba inside, making sure he was comfortable before settling down beside him. The little cub curled up against her, his small body trembling slightly. Nara licked Kiba's fur, trying to calm him. She knew they couldn't stay here forever, but for now, they were safe. She closed her eyes, listening to the sounds of the night. The forest was still silent, but she could feel the tension in the air. Something was coming, something dangerous. As Kiba drifted off to sleep, Nara kept watch. Her mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. She knew she had to protect her cub, no matter what. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The crows had been just the beginning. Something far worse was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And so, the first chapter of Kiba's story came to a close. The little bobcat cub had faced his first real danger, but it was only the beginning. The forest was changing, and with it, the lives of all its creatures. Kiba and Nara would have to be strong, brave, and ready for whatever came next. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. The night stretched on, silent and still. But in the darkness, unseen eyes watched, waiting for the dawn. The forest held its breath, and so did Kiba and Nara, for they knew that when the sun rose, their world would never be the same again. The night was deep, and the forest was cloaked in an unnatural silence. Kiba slept fitfully, his small body twitching as he dreamed. In his dreams, he saw the crows again, their black wings blotting out the sun, their sharp beaks snapping at him. He whimpered, pressing closer to his mother, Nara, who lay beside him, her golden eyes wide open. She hadn't slept a wink. Her ears were perked, listening to every sound, or lack thereof, outside their hidden den. Nara's instincts were screaming at her. The forest was never this quiet. Even in the dead of night, there should have been the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, or the soft padding of a deer's hooves. But tonight, there was nothing. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Kiba stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked up at his mother, his gaze filled with trust and innocence. "Mama," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Why is it so quiet?" Nara nuzzled him gently, trying to reassure him. "It's nothing, little one," she said softly. "Go back to sleep. We're safe here." But Kiba couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to him like a shadow. He curled up tighter, his ears twitching at every imagined sound. Nara sighed, her heart aching for her cub. She wished she could shield him from the dangers of the world, but she knew that was impossible. The forest was changing, and Kiba would have to learn to face its challenges. As the hours passed, the silence grew heavier. Nara's muscles were tense, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. She kept her eyes fixed on the entrance of the den, her claws digging into the soft earth. She didn't know what was out there, but she could feel it. A presence, dark and menacing, lurking just beyond the edge of her senses. Then it happened. A low, guttural growl echoed through the trees, so deep and powerful that it seemed to vibrate through the ground. Kiba's eyes widened in fear, and he pressed himself against Nara, his tiny body trembling. Nara's fur bristled, and a low growl rumbled in her throat. She rose to her feet, her golden eyes blazing with determination. "Stay here, Kiba," she commanded, her voice firm but gentle. "Do not leave this den, no matter what." Kiba nodded, his eyes filled with tears. He wanted to be brave, but he was so scared. He watched as his mother stepped out of the den, her powerful form silhouetted against the moonlight. She moved with the grace of a predator, her muscles coiled and ready for action. Nara stepped into the clearing, her senses on high alert. The growl came again, closer this time. She turned her head, her eyes scanning the shadows. And then she saw it. A massive figure emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing like embers. It was a wolf, but unlike any wolf Nara had ever seen. Its fur was matted and patchy, its ribs visible beneath its skin. But what struck her most were its eyes. They were filled with madness, a hunger that went beyond mere survival. This wolf was dangerous, and it was not alone. Two more wolves stepped out of the shadows, their eyes fixed on Nara. They moved with a predatory grace, their teeth bared in snarls. Nara's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. She would not let these wolves near her cub. The lead wolf lunged first, its jaws snapping at Nara's throat. She dodged to the side, her claws slashing through the air. She caught the wolf across the face, drawing blood. The wolf howled in pain, but it didn't back down. The other two wolves circled her, their growls growing louder. Nara fought with everything she had. She was a skilled hunter, her movements swift and precise. But the wolves were relentless, their attacks coordinated and brutal. Nara's body was soon covered in cuts and bruises, but she refused to give up. She had to protect Kiba. Inside the den, Kiba listened to the sounds of the battle, his heart breaking with every snarl and yelp. He wanted to help his mother, but he was so small, so weak. Tears streamed down his face as he curled into a ball, his tiny body shaking with fear. The fight seemed to go on forever, but finally, Nara managed to drive the wolves away. She stood panting in the clearing, her body battered and bleeding. She turned back to the den, her heart swelling with relief when she saw Kiba's wide eyes peeking out at her. "Mama!" Kiba cried, rushing to her side. He nuzzled her, his tiny body trembling. "You're hurt." Nara licked his head gently, trying to soothe him. "I'm all right, little one," she said, though her voice was strained. "We need to leave this place. It's not safe here anymore." Kiba nodded, his eyes filled with determination. He would be brave for his mother. Together, they set off into the forest, leaving the den behind. The night was still silent, but Nara could feel the presence of the wolves lingering in the shadows. She knew they would be back. As they walked, Kiba stayed close to his mother, his small paws struggling to keep up with her pace. He looked up at her, his heart aching at the sight of her wounds. "Mama," he whispered, "why are the wolves so mean?" Nara sighed, her eyes filled with sadness. "The forest is changing, Kiba," she said. "The animals are hungry, desperate. They will do anything to survive." Kiba's eyes filled with tears. "But we're hungry too," he said. "Why can't we all share?" Nara's heart ached at his innocence. She wished the world was as simple as Kiba believed it to be, but she knew it wasn't. The forest was a harsh place, and it was only getting harsher. As they walked, the first light of dawn began to break through the trees. The forest was slowly coming to life, the sounds of birds and insects filling the air. But Nara didn't feel relieved. She knew the danger wasn't over. The wolves were still out there, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Nara and Kiba reached a small stream, and Nara stopped to drink. Kiba followed suit, lapping at the cool water. As they drank, Nara's ears twitched. She heard something, a soft rustling in the bushes. She turned her head, her eyes narrowing. From the bushes emerged a small, scruffy fox. Its fur was a patchy mix of red and brown, and its eyes were filled with fear. It limped toward the stream, its movement slow and pained. Nara watched it carefully, her instincts on high alert. The fox looked up at Nara, its eyes pleading. "Please," it whispered, its voice barely audible. "Help me." Nara's heart softened. She could see the pain in the fox's eyes, the desperation. She glanced at Kiba, who was watching the fox with wide, curious eyes. She knew what she had to do. "Come," Nara said gently. "We'll help you." The fox's eyes filled with gratitude as it limped towards them. Kiba nuzzled the fox, his tiny body radiating warmth and kindness. Nara felt a swell of pride in her chest. Despite the dangers they faced, Kiba's heart remained pure. As the three of them continued their journey, Nara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The forest was alive with unseen eyes, and the danger was far from over. But for now, they were together, and that was enough. The sun rose higher in the sky, casting its golden light over the forest. But the shadows still lingered, waiting for their moment to strike. Nara knew that the days ahead would be filled with challenges, but she was determined to protect her cub, no matter what. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled light on the forest floor. Nara, Kiba, and the injured fox moved slowly through the underbrush. The fox, whom Kiba had named Rusty, limped alongside them, his breathing labored but his spirit unbroken. Kiba stayed close to Rusty, his small heart filled with compassion for the wounded creature. Nara kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, her instincts still on edge. The forest felt different, alive with tension, as if it were holding its breath. "Where are we going, Mama?" Kiba asked, his voice soft but filled with curiosity. "Somewhere safe," Nara replied, though she wasn't entirely sure where that might be. The forest she once knew so well had become unpredictable, and every shadow seemed to hide a new threat. Rusty glanced at Nara, his amber eyes filled with gratitude and something else, something deeper. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't have to help me." Nara nodded, her golden eyes softening. "We're all just trying to survive," she said. "But you're not like the others. You're not driven by hunger or madness. What happened to you?" Rusty hesitated, his gaze dropping to the ground. "It's a long story," he said, "but I'll tell you. You deserve to know." As they walked, Rusty began to speak. His voice was low and filled with pain, but also with a strange kind of hope. "I used to live in a part of the forest far from here," he said. "It was peaceful, full of life, but then something changed. The animals started disappearing. At first, it was just a few here and there, but soon, whole families were gone. The ones who remained, they changed. They became aggressive, desperate. It was like a sickness had spread through the forest." Kiba's eyes widened in fear, and he pressed closer to Nara. "A sickness?" he whispered. Rusty nodded. "Yes, it started with the wolves. They became different, hungrier, more violent. They attacked anything that moved, even their own kind. Then it spread to the other animals. The deer, the rabbits, even the birds. It was as if the forest itself was turning against us." Nara's ears twitched, her mind racing. She had noticed the changes too, the silence, the aggression, the unnatural behavior of the animals. But she hadn't realized how widespread it was. "What caused it?" she asked, her voice tense. Rusty's eyes darkened. "There's a place deep in the forest," he said. "A place the animals avoid. It's called the Hollow. It's said to be cursed, filled with darkness. I don't know if it's true, but something is coming from there. Something evil." Kiba shivered, his small body trembling. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Rusty shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I've seen things, shadows moving in the night, whispers on the wind. And the crows, they're always watching, always waiting. They're not just birds. They're something else." Nara's heart sank. She had always known the forest was dangerous, but this was something far worse. If what Rusty said was true, then they were all in grave danger. She looked down at Kiba, her heart aching at the fear in his eyes. She had to protect him, no matter what. "We need to find a safe place," Nara said, her voice firm. "Somewhere far from the Hollow, far from the wolves and crows." Rusty nodded, though his expression was grim. "There's a place," he said. "A hidden valley, deep in the mountains. It's said to be untouched by the darkness. But it's a long journey, and the path is dangerous." Nara's eyes narrowed. "We don't have a choice," she said. "We'll go to the valley. But first we need to rest. You're in no condition to travel far." Rusty nodded gratefully, his body trembling with exhaustion. They found a small clearing, sheltered by thick bushes and tall trees. Nara helped Rusty settle down, her movements gentle but efficient. Kiba curled up beside him, his small body radiating warmth and comfort. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Nara kept watch, her golden eyes scanning the trees. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The forest was too quiet, too still. Even the birds seemed to have fallen silent. Kiba looked up at his mother, his eyes filled with worry. "Mama," he whispered, "will we be safe in the valley?" Nara nuzzled him gently, her heart aching at the fear in his voice. "We'll be safe, little one," she said. "I promise." But deep down, Nara wasn't sure. The forest was changing, and the darkness was spreading. She didn't know if there was any place left that was truly safe. As the day wore on, Rusty's condition worsened. His breathing became more labored, and his body trembled with pain. Kiba stayed by his side, his small heart breaking at the sight of the fox's suffering. He nuzzled Rusty gently, his tiny body radiating warmth and comfort. "You'll be okay, Rusty," Kiba whispered. "We'll get you to the valley and you'll be safe." Rusty smiled weakly, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Kiba," he said. "You're a brave little cub." Kiba's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them away. He had to be brave, for Rusty and for his mother. He couldn't let them down. As the sun began to set, Nara made a decision. They couldn't stay here any longer. They had to move, no matter how dangerous the journey might be. She nudged Kiba gently, urging him to his feet. "We need to go," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "Rusty, can you walk?" Rusty nodded, though his movements were slow and pained. "I'll try," he said. Together, they set off into the forest, the shadows growing longer as the sun dipped below the horizon. The journey was slow and arduous, but they pressed on, driven by the hope of finding safety. As they walked, Kiba couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The forest felt different at night, alive with unseen eyes and whispered threats. He stayed close to his mother, his small body trembling with fear. Nara's heart ached for her cub, but she knew she had to be strong. She had to protect him, no matter what. She glanced at Rusty, who was struggling to keep up. She knew they couldn't stop, not until they reached the valley. But as they walked, the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees grew thicker, the shadows darker. And then they heard it, a low, guttural growl echoing to the trees. Nara's heart sank. The wolves had found them. She turned to Kiba, her eyes filled with determination. "Run, Kiba," she said. "Run as fast as you can. Don't look back." Kiba's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. He turned and ran, his small legs carrying him as fast as they could. Nara watched him go, her heart breaking at the sight of her cub fleeing into the darkness. She turned to face the wolves, her golden eyes blazing with fury. She would not let them harm her cub. She would fight to her last breath. The wolves emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with madness. They circled Nara, their growls growing louder. Nara stood her ground, her claws digging into the earth. She was ready. The lead wolf lunged first, its jaws snapping at Nara's throat. She dodged to the side, her claws slashing through the air. She caught the wolf across the face, drawing blood. The wolf howled in pain, but it didn't back down. The other wolves circled her, their growls growing louder. Nara fought with everything she had. She was a skilled hunter, her movements swift and precise. But the wolves were relentless, their attacks coordinated and brutal. Nara's body was soon covered in cuts and bruises, but she refused to give up. She had to protect Kiba. As the battle raged on, Kiba ran through the forest, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he had to keep running. He couldn't let his mother's sacrifice be in vain. But as he ran, he heard something, a soft rustling in the bushes. He froze, his eyes wide with fear. From the bushes emerged a figure, its eyes glowing in the darkness. Kiba's heart sank. It was a crow, its black feathers glistening in the moonlight. But this was no ordinary crow. Its eyes were filled with a strange, unnatural light. Its beak was twisted into a cruel smile. Kiba backed away, his small body trembling with fear. The crow cawed, its voice echoing through the trees. And then it spoke. "Little cub," it said, its voice filled with malice. "You cannot escape." Kiba's eyes filled with tears, but he stood his ground. He couldn't run anymore. He had to be brave, for his mother, for Rusty, for himself. The crow lunged at him, its beak snapping at his face. Kiba closed his eyes, bracing himself for the impact, but it never came. Instead, he heard a loud caw, followed by the sound of flapping wings. He opened his eyes to see the crow flying away, its form disappearing into the darkness. Kiba looked around, his heart racing. What had just happened? He didn't know, but he knew he couldn't stay here. He had to keep moving. As he turned to run, he heard a soft voice behind him. "Kiba." He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He turned slowly, his eyes wide with fear. Standing before him was a figure, its form cloaked in shadow. But as it stepped into the moonlight, Kiba's eyes widened in shock. It was a bobcat, but unlike any he had ever seen. Its fur was pure white, its eyes glowing with a strange, otherworldly light. It looked at Kiba, its gaze filled with both sadness and hope. "Kiba," it said again, its voice soft but filled with power. "You are not alone." Kiba's eyes filled with tears, but he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He didn't know who or what this bobcat was, but he knew it meant him no harm. The white bobcat stepped closer, its movements graceful and serene. "The forest is in danger," it said, "but you have the power to save it." Kiba's heart raced. "Me," he whispered, "but I'm just a cub." The white bobcat smiled, its eyes filled with warmth. "You are more than you know, Kiba," it said, "but you must be brave. The journey ahead will be difficult, but you are not alone." Kiba nodded, his small body trembling with fear and determination. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew he had to try. For his mother, for Rusty, for the forest. The white bobcat stepped back, its form fading into shadows. "Go, Kiba," it said. "Find the valley. The answers you seek are there." And with that, it was gone. Kiba stood alone in the forest, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what had just happened, but he knew he had to keep moving. He had to find the valley, no matter what. As he set off into the darkness, he felt a strange sense of hope. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew he wasn't alone. The forest was alive with unseen eyes, and the danger was far from over. But Kiba was determined to face it, no matter what. Kiba ran through the forest, his small paws pounding against the earth. The encounter with the white bobcat had left him both terrified and hopeful. He didn't fully understand what had happened, but the bobcat's words echoed in his mind. Asterisk, "You are more than you know, Kiba. You have the power to save the forest." Asterisk, the weight of those words pressed heavily on his tiny shoulders, but he couldn't stop to think about it. He had to keep moving. He had to find the valley. The forest around him was eerily silent, the usual sounds of life replaced by an oppressive stillness. The trees seemed to loom taller, their branches twisting like claws against the night sky. Kiba's heart raced as he ran, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He didn't know where he was going, but he trusted the white bobcat's guidance. Somewhere ahead lay the valley, a place of safety, a place of answers. As he ran, Kiba's mind wandered his mother, Nara. He had left her behind, fighting the wolves. The thought of her alone and injured made his chest ache. He wanted to turn back, to help her, but he knew he couldn't. She had told him to run, and he had to trust that she would find him again. Still, the guilt gnawed at him, and tears streamed down his face as he ran. After what felt like hours, Kiba stumbled upon a narrow path winding through the trees. The ground was rocky, and the air grew colder as he followed it. The path led uphill, and Kiba's legs burned with exhaustion, but he pushed himself to keep going. He had to reach the valley. He had to find safety. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to break through the trees, Kiba reached the top of the hill. He paused, his breath coming in ragged gasps, and looked out over the landscape before him. What he saw took his breath away. Spread out below him was a vast, lush valley, bathed in the golden light of the rising sun. The grass was a vibrant green, dotted with colorful flowers, and a crystal-clear stream wound its way through the center. The air was filled with the sounds of birdsong and the gentle rustling of leaves. It was the most beautiful place Kiba had ever seen. But as he looked closer, he noticed something strange. The edges of the valley were shrouded in a thick, dark mist that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The mist clung to the trees, twisting them into grotesque shapes, and the birdsong grew quieter the closer it got to the mist. It was as if the valley was a sanctuary surrounded by a wall of darkness. Kiba hesitated, his small body trembling. The valley was beautiful, but the mist filled him with dread. Still, he knew he had no choice. He had to go down there. He had to find the answers the white bobcat had spoken of. As he made his way down the hill, Kiba noticed something else, a figure standing near the stream. It was a deer, its coat a soft, golden brown, its eyes filled with a gentle warmth. The deer looked up as Kiba approached, its ears twitching. "Hello, little one," the deer said, its voice soft and soothing. "You've come a long way." Kiba blinked in surprise. He had never heard a deer speak before. Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. The deer smiled. "I am Arya, guardian of this valley. I've been waiting for you, Kiba." Kiba's eyes widened. "You know my name?" Arya nodded. "The forest has been whispering about you. You are the one who can save us." Kiba's heart raced. "But I'm just a cub. I don't know how to save anyone." Arya stepped closer, her eyes filled with compassion. "You are more than you know, Kiba. The forest chose you for a reason, but you must be brave. The journey ahead will not be easy." Kiba swallowed hard, his small body trembling. "What do I have to do?" Arya turned and gestured toward the mist at the edge of the valley. "The darkness you see is spreading. It comes from the hollow, a place of great evil. If it is not stopped, it will consume the entire forest and everything in it." Kiba's eyes filled with tears. "But how can I stop it? I'm just a cub." Arya nuzzled him gently, her touch warm and reassuring. "You are not alone, Kiba. There are others who will help you." But you must be the one to face the darkness. Only you can do it. Kiba looked up at her, his heart pounding. He didn't know if he could do it, but he knew he had to try. For his mother, for Rusty, for the forest. What do I need to do? He asked, his voice filled with determination. Arya smiled. First, you must rest. You've been through so much already. The valley will keep you safe for now. When you're ready, we will begin. Kiba nodded, his body trembling with exhaustion. He followed Arya to a soft patch of grass near the stream, where he curled up and closed his eyes. The sounds of the valley, the gentle rustling of leaves, the soothing babble of the stream, lulled him into a deep, dreamless sleep. When Kiba awoke, the sun was high in the sky, and the valley was alive with activity. Birds flitted through the trees, and small animals scurried through the grass. Arya was nearby, grazing peacefully. She looked up as Kiba stirred, her eyes filled with warmth. How do you feel, little one? She asked. Kiba stretched, his body still aching, but feeling stronger than before. I'm okay, he said. Thank you. Arya nodded. Good. There is someone I want you to meet. She led Kiba to a small grove of trees, where a figure stood waiting. It was a fox, its fur vibrant red, and its eyes filled with intelligence. Kiba's heart leapt with hope. Rusty, he whispered. But as the fox turned to face him, Kiba realized it wasn't Rusty. This fox was older, its fur streaked with gray, and its eyes filled with a deep sadness. This is Lior, Arya said. He is the last of his kind. His family was taken by the darkness. Kiba's heart ached at the pain in Lior's eyes. I'm sorry, he said softly. Lior nodded, his voice heavy with grief. Thank you, little one, but there is no time for sorrow. We must act before it's too late. Arya stepped forward, her expression serious. Kiba, Lior will guide you to the hollow. He knows the way. But once you're there, you must face the darkness alone. Kiba's heart raced, but he nodded. I'll do it, he said, his voice filled with determination. Lior stepped closer, his eyes filled with a fierce resolve. We leave at dawn, he said. Rest now, little one. You will need your strength. As the sun began to set, Kiba curled up near the stream, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. He didn't know if he could face the darkness, but he knew he had to try. For his mother, for Rusty, for the forest. The valley was beautiful, but the shadows at its edges loomed large, a reminder of the danger that awaited. Kiba closed his eyes, his heart filled with both fear and hope. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. He was not alone. The dawn broke over the valley, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Kiba stood at the edge of the mist, his small body trembling, but his heart filled with determination. Beside him stood Lior, the wise fox, his eyes sharp and focused. Arya, the guardian deer, stood a few paces behind them, her gaze filled with both hope and sorrow. This is it, Kiba, Lior said, his voice steady. Beyond this mist lies the hollow, the source of the darkness. Are you ready? Kiba took a deep breath, his paws digging into the soft earth. He thought of his mother, Nara, fighting the wolves to protect him. He thought of Rusty, the injured fox who had shown him kindness. He thought of the forest, the trees, the animals, the life that was slowly being consumed by the darkness. He couldn't let them down. I'm ready, Kiba said, his voice firm. Lior nodded, his expression filled with pride. Then let's go. Together, they stepped into the mist. It was cold and thick, clinging to Kiba's fur like a wet blanket. The air was heavy, and every breath felt like a struggle. The sounds of the valley faded away, replaced by an eerie silence. Kiba's heart pounded in his chest, but he pressed on, following Lior's lead. As they walked, the mist grew darker, and the ground beneath their paws became uneven and rocky. The trees here were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air was filled with a faint, acrid smell that made Kiba's nose wrinkle. We're close, Lior whispered, his voice barely audible. Stay alert. Kiba nodded, his eyes scanning the shadows. He could feel it, the presence of something dark and powerful, lurking just beyond the mist. His fur bristled, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Suddenly, The mist parted, revealing a vast, desolate clearing. In the center stood a massive, ancient tree, its trunk blackened and cracked. The branches were bare, and the ground around it was littered with bones. The air was thick with a suffocating darkness that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. "This is it," Leor said, his voice filled with dread. "The hollow." Kiba's heart raced as he stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the tree. He could feel the darkness pressing in on him, trying to suffocate him. But he refused to back down. He had come too far to give up now. As he approached the tree, a low, guttural voice echoed through the clearing. "Who dares to enter my domain?" Kiba froze, his eyes wide with fear. From the shadows emerged a figure, a massive, shadowy wolf, its eyes glowing with a cold, unnatural light. Its fur was matted and patchy, and its teeth were bared in a snarl. This was no ordinary wolf. This was the source of the darkness. "You!" the wolf growled, its voice filled with malice. "You are just a cub. What do you hope to accomplish here?" Kiba's legs trembled, but he stood his ground. "I've come to stop you," he said, his voice shaking but filled with determination. "You're hurting the forest. You're hurting everyone I care about. I won't let you do it anymore." The wolf let out a low, menacing laugh. "You think you can stop me? You are nothing but a weak, helpless cub. You cannot defeat me." Kiba's heart pounded, but he refused to back down. He thought of the white bobcat's words. Asterisk, "You are more than you know, Kiba. You have the power to save the forest." Asterisk, he didn't know if it was true, but he had to believe it. He had to try. "I may be small," Kiba said, his voice growing stronger, "but I'm not alone. The forest is with me, and I won't let you destroy it." The wolf's eyes narrowed, and it lunged at Kiba, its jaws snapping. Kiba dodged aside, his small body moving with surprising speed. He lashed out with his claws, catching the wolf across the face. The wolf howled in pain, but it didn't back down. It attacked again, its movement swift and brutal. Kiba fought with everything he had, his small body moving with a grace and strength he didn't know he possessed. But the wolf was powerful, and Kiba was soon covered in cuts and bruises. He was tiring, and he knew he couldn't keep this up much longer. As the wolf lunged again, Kiba closed his eyes, his heart filled with desperation. He thought of his mother, of Rusty, of the forest. He thought of the white bobcat's words. And then he felt it, a warmth spreading through his body, a light growing within him. Kiba opened his eyes, and they were glowing with a soft, golden light. The light spread through his body, illuminating the darkness around him. The wolf hesitated, its eyes filled with fear. What are you?" it growled, its voice trembling. Kiba didn't answer. He stepped forward, the light growing brighter with every step. The wolf backed away, its snarl turning into a whimper. The darkness around him began to fade, replaced by the warm, golden light. With a final, desperate snarl, the wolf turned and fled, disappearing into the mist. The light grew brighter, filling the clearing and driving away the darkness. The ancient tree began to change, its blackened bark turning brown, its branches sprouting new leaves. The ground around it became lush and green, and the air was filled with the sounds of birdsong. Kiba stood in the center of the clearing, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his heart filled with joy. He had done it. He had saved the forest. Leor stepped forward, his eyes filled with awe. "You did it, Kiba," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You saved us all." Kiba smiled, his small body radiating warmth and light. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "Without all of you." As the light faded, Kiba felt a familiar presence behind him. He turned to see his mother, Nara, standing there, her golden eyes filled with tears. She stepped forward, nuzzling him gently. "I'm so proud of you, Kiba," she said, her voice filled with love. "You are braver than I ever could have imagined." Kiba nuzzled her back, his heart swelling with happiness. He had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The forest was safe, and he was surrounded by those he loved. Thank you for joining Kiba on his incredible journey. If you were moved by his bravery and determination, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming and adventurous stories. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Kiba's paws? Would you have faced the darkness, or would you have found another way to save the forest? We'd love to hear your thoughts.